at the top of the
Because this is a government that has a duty to the rule of law, faced with the conflict in Gaza, it's our legal responsibility and obligation to review export licenses. It's what we said we'd do in opposition. That process was complete and reported to Parliament yesterday by the Foreign Secretary. The judgment was whether there is a clear risk that anything we supply from this country could be linked to a serious violation of international humanitarian law. And the assessment was that in the case of around 30 components for military equipment, this was the case. And so just as governments have done in the past, from Margaret Thatcher to Gordon Brown, we've suspended the export licenses on those components and not affected any of the 300 plus other exports that we put into Israel that may be used for defensive purposes or things that are nothing to do with the conflict. It helps people, I hope, understand the process more clearly. This is a process that is following a legal system that's been in place for some years now, and it's one of the toughest export licensing regimes that exist in the world. There's no blanket ban, there's no arms embargo. This is a question item by item, license by license. Is there a risk? And this is the process we're obliged to follow. Is there a clear risk that its use in Gaza could be linked to violations of international humanitarian law? And that was the conclusion of the process. 30 out of around 350 export licenses have therefore been suspended with immediate effect. Margaret Thatcher did it in the 1980s. Gordon Brown did it in 2009. And in both cases, when there was a ceasefire, those suspensions were lifted. And that's the bigger argument here. In the end, this conflict, the concerns that people have, will be settled with an immediate ceasefire. That's what David Lammy, as Foreign Secretary, and I have both been in the region together and separately, arguing for, pressing for, because that's the way we release the hostages, that's the way that we get aid into Gaza, that's the way that we pave a longer-term path to a lasting peace in the region. No, if there is a change in the conflict in Gaza, where these components are no longer a risk that international humanitarian law may be breached, then these licenses may be reviewed and those suspensions may be lifted. My point about the ceasefire is that that's what we're working for. That's what we've argued for more than 6 months, led the arguments in the UK, worked behind the scenes in opposition and in government to try and reinforce the case for allies to get that ceasefire in place.
Mr. Speaker, as concern at the horrifying scenes in Gaza has risen, many in this House, as well as esteemed lawyers and international organisations, have raised British arms export licensing to Israel. After raising my own concerns from opposition on taking office, I immediately sought to update the review. And on my first appearance as Foreign Secretary in this House, I committed to sharing the review's conclusions. We have rigorously followed every stage of the process which the previous Conservative government established. And let me first be clear on the review's scope. This government is not an international court. We have not and could not arbitrate on whether or not Israel has breached international humanitarian law. This is a forward-looking evaluation, not a determination of innocence or guilt, and it does not prejudge any future determinations by the competent courts. But facing a conflict such as this, it is this government's legal duty to review export licences. It is with regret that I inform the House today the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than that for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. I have informed my Right Honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, and he is therefore today announcing the suspension of around 30 from a total of approximately 350 to Israel as required under the Export Controls Act. These include equipment that we assess is for use in the current conflict in Gaza, such as important components which go into military aircraft, including fighter aircraft, helicopters and drones, as well as items which facilitate ground targeting.